Welcome back, and thank you for joining us for the Authors and Artists Festival Rewilding. And thank you to our sponsors, who are Rescue Poetics, Mary King, Kathy Cremens, and the New England Grassroots Environment Fund. Our next presenters here in the screening room are Cayman Connection. Throughout this part of part one, please put your questions in the chat for Antonio, who is our first presenter. And now, welcome to Cayman Connection. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having us, Lise, and thank you to Nature Culture. I'm Rita Estevanovich. I am the Global Programs Manager for Cayman Connection, and I'm also a book club member.
Hi, everyone, and lovely to be here today. My name's Ashley Smith, and I'm Executive Director of Cayman Connection Global Diaspora, celebrating Caymanians, friends, and associates across the world.
And I'm Antonio Arch. We want to thank, on behalf of Cayman Connection, Lise McLaughlin, Nature Culture, and acknowledge the image behind us. It's called Photosynthesis Leaf by Martin Bridge, and that and other work can be found at thebridgebrothers.com. I'm so proud to be speaking today on behalf of Cayman Connection. We are a diverse group made up of members of the Cayman Islands diaspora, with what connecting us being home. I'm currently speaking from the UK, and I've been here since lockdown began in early 2020, working on a PhD. And if I'm honest, it was the most hopeless and lonely experience I've ever had. 4,000 miles from home, not able to leave my little flat. The phone rings, and it was Kate Candaya, our immediate past executive director. And she was calling out of the blue to find out if I was needing anything or doing okay, and wanted to confirm my address so that Cayman Connection could FedEx me Christmas dinner and rum cake in a couple of months. So when the idea of a book club came along, it felt like my sort of civic duty and the really least that I could do, which has become a great fit. Book club and I, some connect with a place and its music and history to form bonds. Others, like me, look to stories, fiction, and literature. And like some other similar book clubs, the stories and novels become the means by which we try to understand ourselves, our identity, our environmental issues, and situate ourselves within the region. It's a really exciting time of year these past couple of months too, because new books are arriving for the holidays. It's the time of the OCM Bocas Awards, which are the major awards for Caribbean literature. And then there's the Booker Prize. It's because of stories like these that I found myself here in Manchester, England, a few years ago, sitting in my first MFA workshop. It had been 2 decades that I'd been writing public relations copy for work and to sustain a little art gallery in Toronto that I'm still paying off today. In MFA workshops, you're not picking apart a work of classical literature like you would in a lit class. You're reciting the pages of your best recent work, and then you sit down around a conference table and endure hearing from your peers everything that's wrong and inferior about that piece of writing. You zip your lips, you're forbidden to respond or reply, but you have to stand up and say thank you to everyone for your constructive criticism, provided you survive the experience. That process of examining life and memories and experiences and impressions, and then trying to weave it and turn it into a story, is referred to as autoethnography. And that word it sounds kind of scary, but it still doesn't scare me as much as somebody mentioning MFA workshop. But scary as it was, I wanted to develop as a writer and editor for reasons of representation. For years now, I've hoped for some representation that were containing more stories about Grand Cayman, the Cayman Islands, the Caymanian identity. And while we've experienced a creative boom in just the past decade, and I'll give you some examples, the Cayman Islands folk singers tour the world. There are designers like Izzy B, Reba Dilbert, and Jawara Alain. Jawara Alain's work was just in Vogue in July. And writers, directors and filmmakers like Frankie Flowers and Jazz Pitcairn, whose film Ivan just premiered at the Hawaii Film Festival. And Jazz was just nominated for an Emmy Award for her work on Black Lady Sketch Show, which I highly recommend you watch. Funny stuff. But the Cayman Islands, like the other remaining British overseas territories, don't have a lot of literature that represent us. What's even worse is when readers go looking for fiction set in Cayman, they end up with one book, and that's The Firm by John Grisham. I'll get to more of that later. Let's fast forward 2 years to 2020, which was supposed to be a big year for Caribbean literature. There had been plans in the works for quite a while to establish a greater sense of the genre, and establishing the 12th of July as Caribbean Literature Day to celebrate the birth and growth of Caribbean literature as its own particular significant genre. That day coincides with the Catholic Bishop of Yucatan ordering the destruction of the entire Mayan library, effectively destroying the written tradition and alphabet of an entire culture and one of the oldest cultures in human history. Some events were also being planned within the Caribbean and at institutions across Britain to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the OCM Bocas Award. At that point, I just managed to complete an MFA and secure funding for a PhD research project, again, on creative writing and Caribbean fiction. 6.5 years after that first workshop and writing up my PhD thesis, my waking life today is divided into two areas. It's research, which comprises the history, the social studies, the fiction that you read for background and reference, and practice. And the practice is your original writing. And I'm going to assume that you really want to know my research and practice areas. My research interests include Caribbean fiction, the storytelling and oral traditions of the British Caribbean, related place writing, and reproducing our social, economic, and environmental challenges in the Cayman Islands using familiar prose and the local accent and dialect. That picture is of Georgetown from the Cayman Islands National Archives. It was once known as Arches Square, and across the street was Arch Shipyards. Commerce in the day was represented by barely more than a subsistence economy, and it was based on mahogany, shipbuilding, thatch rope, and turtle meat. Today, that spot is the site of the Hard Rock Cafe. There are no schooners, no thatch or rope. The local variety of mahogany is so rare it's protected under law, and green turtle is an endangered species. There are two little boys in that picture, one sitting on the log and one observing the other on the mahogany log. One is my uncle, the other is my father. Back to practice. My practice, on the other hand, concentrates on place and setting and telling better stories about Caymanian identity, cultural heritage, and better than the stories that are told in cross-fiction and popular culture. I'm curious about what they have in common, as well as what might be different. I'm still looking for stories that I recognize, that are familiar to me, that would be comforting, with familiar voices, names, places, even food. Cayman has a lot in common with the culture and food and traditions of Jamaica, which is our closest neighbor. But we have an entirely different story, and there's still no representation of that. There aren't enough truly Caymanian stories. Oh, by the way, that picture is also from the Cayman National Archives. It's possibly the only photograph that they would have of an enslaved person. I know a little bit about Jada Webster, would have been her name, thanks to oral tradition. What other information I've found, I've had to use DNA technology to rely on. And she was my great-great-great-grandmother. and was probably, based on that DNA profile, an infant when she was kidnapped from her coastal community in Ghana or Benin and brought to the Caribbean in the hold of a slave ship. Now, I want to be careful about how I use the term Caribbean literature, because it's a bit of a misnomer. Granted, Caribbean writers are pioneering environmental literature, and we're learning about global warming and rising seas, coral bleaching and erosion, thanks to storytelling and fiction. At the same time, the idea of one literature for all the Caribbean is just too broad. There are a lot of different cultures living and thriving within the Caribbean basin, and there are too many stories to call them all the same. And our story is particularly unique. That's partially from geography and geology. We don't sit within an archipelago like what you would see in other developed geography, but we are three tiny protruding tops of massive but extinct volcanoes in the middle of one of the deepest bodies of water on the planet. And what sits on top of those volcanoes are the three Cayman Islands, surrounded by treacherous sea, harsh conditions, and strong currents. We're protected by all of that, thanks in part to coral reefs and mangrove wetlands, both which are now in danger from warming and rising seas and overdevelopment. We also have no sea harbor, deep sea harbor, I'm sorry. Other island territories have also had a long developmental head start through shipping, commerce, sugarcane, and coffee. Nearby Port Royal, the site near modern-day Kingston, Jamaica, was at one point the region's largest city, with enough commerce and wealth to rival Boston. And an 1802 census in the Cayman Islands would have recorded 933 people for all three islands, compared to an estimated 250,000 in Jamaica. We were still completely undeveloped and largely unheard of, even in the middle of the 20th century, when the Saturday Evening Post, an Ottawa citizen, were still referring to Grand Cayman as the island that time forgot. But within the decade, that really changed. There was suddenly something new called scuba diving. The jet and diesel engines suddenly were bringing a lot more visitors a lot faster. And that brought some drastic change really fast, followed by financial services and the first banks arriving in the 1950s and 60s. Fast forward to 1991, and we're back at John Grisham. See what I did there? Who has by then brokered a deal with Paramount Pictures. They've signed on director and producer Sidney Pollack, I'm sorry, and had begun pre-production. All of this before a single copy of the hardback first edition of The Firm has even been printed or shipped to bookstores, altering really almost permanently how Cayman is portrayed in literature and popular culture, skewing public perception. And that's become known as a phenomenon that we call the Grisham effect. The Firm was an unprecedented bestseller, selling 14 million copies to date. The film adaptation was an even bigger commercial success, with paperback tie-ins helping to keep the novel on the New York Times bestseller list for nearly a year, both of which made us look really bad. People now think, as a result of portrayal in the book and film, that Cayman is full of tax dodgers and retired robber barons living off other people's money, which is simply not true. But our reputation was affected and continues to be today. The effects of using Grand Cayman as a backdrop, notice I use backdrop and not setting, has changed how cultures abroad see Caymanian life. And Grisham reluctantly admitted later how little he knew about the Cayman Islands, and that his research for The Firm came from a 5-day working vacation and business trip, largely spent at a resort on a beach. Really, the nicest thing that I can say about the firm is it's fantastic. It's problematic. The settings and dialects and characters aren't real. They're not realistic, and they're bordering on unflattering and times offensive. Just a little excerpt of my favorite part of the novel. Avery wiped the sweat from his forehead. This place has always attracted pirates. Once it was Blackbeard, now it's modern-day pirates who form corporations and hide their money. Right, Mon? Right, Mon, the driver replied. That's 7 Mile Beach, Avery said. One of the most beautiful and most famous in the world. Right, Mon? Right, Mon. Sand as white as sugar. Warm, clear water. Warm, beautiful women. Right, Mon? Right, Mon. It's like Grisham's setting and dialogue and characterizations were completely made up fantasy. There's no law enforcement or Coast Guard or customs or immigration or border control in his version of the Cayman Islands. Boston and Memphis are portrayed quite realistically enough that you would assume if you were reading the book, as the major American and British consumer did, that this Grand Cayman portrayed in the novel, compared to Memphis and New York, were realistic. It's as if he wanted this place, the people who live there, the landscape, the family names to be completely fake. And that image has stuck, and that has been remarkably bad for us. Since the release of the firm in 1991, our government has spent tens of millions of dollars countering this image from a project that originally they thought would be helpful for tourism, inward investment, and spark more film and TV productions. Instead, Cayman has done a lot of hard time on the Financial Action Task Force's tax haven gray list, which we were only removed from last week. By some estimates, and for comparison, the state of Delaware has seen more money and unverifiable transactions than the Cayman Islands over the same period. A lack of reflection or record has meant that fiction has often stood in place of historical fact. And that's far more interesting than even bad fiction. The media hasn't helped with Cayman rehabilitating our reputation as a banana republic, where everyone is in some way playing a part in financial crimes and tax avoidance, hiding taxable income and money laundering. In 2016, a British journalist named Jack Peretti, his BBC documentary, Britain's £1 trillion Island, and an accompanying Guardian article used stereotypes, sweeping generalizations, and some unreliable interviews to amplify the message that our economy and existence are solely to undermine other countries' systems of taxation. So basically, I argue that we've been a little used, and it's not a good use of literature. I now understand more than ever that it's important to support writers connected to and invested in place and its culture. And even if that writing is critical, especially when it's critical, which is what we argue for, the celebration of and sharing of literature that represents the voices of the people who live there. We, like anywhere, want to speak for ourselves. The Caymanian identity today is unique, complex, and still evolving. In just 2 generations, the idyllic island outpost in those travel articles from the Ottawa Citizen and the Saturday Evening Post has morphed into something transformed in a place that no longer resembles the island that my probably 10th generation ancestor, Isaac Bodden, would have encountered when he became its first permanent resident settler on arriving from Portsmouth, England in 1654. There still aren't many dominant examples of fiction and story that attempt to capture the local and national identity. The Grisham effect remains partially because we still have fiction on shelves to counter it. But what we do have is a sense of social cohesion, cultural richness, belonging, communal capital. And we've only just begun to fold our history into stories of our own. But if this was book club, I'd say that we were only just getting to the good part of the Cayman Islands story. Thank you, and I'll post a bibliography and further reading list in the chat.
Thank you, Antonio. Love all those beautiful pictures of Cayman. So people feel free to put your questions in the chat for Antonio, and he's going to put some resources also. We have the book club for Cayman Connection is a lot of fun. We get to read some of these literatures that are written by people who actually live there, not John Grisham. So go ahead and put your questions in the chat, and maybe Antonio can give us some more insights. Thank you.
And Ashley and Rita are here to answer any questions that I can't.
Well, maybe I'll start since people are feeling shy. My question is about the differences among Caribbean literature. You know, Cayman has a very different history, as you pointed out. Maybe we'd like to say a few things about the development of the arts on Cayman.
Ooh, Ashley and Rita, I can say that just watching the last decade, there has been a booming, thriving cultural industry renaissance. There's now art, design, a local sense of architecture, an arts festival. There is so much going on. Rita, you should jump in now.
Well, I guess this would be a good time to thank you also, Antonio, for sharing your research, your perspective today. Really appreciate it. Antonio is a brilliant book club lead, and we're very grateful to have him with us. Yes, I would have to agree with you, Antonio, regarding what's been happening in the past, maybe let's say 20 years or so. And I think it's due in large part to the work of the Cayman National Cultural Foundation, as well as the other arts and cultural organizations. More recently, the Cayman Islands Museum, and maybe we can include in that the National Gallery and others who are really pushing the narrative of us as Caymanians telling our own stories. I believe the Cayman Islands Folk Singers just celebrated 14 years. And what is really lovely, and I think ties in nicely here with rewilding, is that the songs that have been unearthed and the songs that are being pulled from various parts of the region, as well as, you know, our grandparents' backyards, are tied to the land. And it shows and showcases such a different Cayman Islands. You know, when you think of songs like the Song of the Yam, Manzibot in the Sound, which is one of our classic folk songs about our maritime heritage and fishing. There, Chip Up Potato, you know, all of these are tied to the land, and it's quite different than even the music of today. But I agree, we have had this sort of a renaissance in arts and culture, and more there's been this awareness about the need for us to protect our land, our resources, and we're seeing a whole new generation of young people who, many of whom have been abroad or are studying abroad or have studied abroad. By the way, young to me is anything under about 4 to 5. So young people just coming back with the knowledge and integrating that into the local arts and cultural scene. So it is a positive thing. And I think there's a lot of hope right now for us to really tell our own stories, and at the same time protect our landscape and our cultural landscape. So that's all I'll say to that. There are a couple of other questions, or if Lise has another one, or Ashley, Antonio, we'd love you to answer them.
I see.
Oh, sorry. In the chat, can you see the the comment from Kate Kandaya, who says, huge thank you to all Cayman Connection. What would your message be to new authors, comedians, or otherwise wanting to write a story set in Cayman or using Cayman as the backdrop to a story?
Write it down, get it down. Nobody's first draft is ever a good draft. I'm not encouraging the behavior, but Hemingway said, write drunk, edit sober. Do whatever you have to do to get it down on paper so you have something to edit. Show it to someone you trust and respect, and it doesn't matter. It might sit in a drawer like my work does for years. It might help you to build your academic portfolio. It might get you somewhere else. Just keep writing it down. Do it for yourself, not for an audience.
Oh, that's beautiful. Great advice for up and coming writers. We hope there are many more comedians thinking about putting things down on paper. If we have no more questions, we could switch to part 2. Are you guys feeling ready for that?
Sure.
Okay.
I did have one question for Antonio, though, Lise, and
Yeah.
because he was speaking a bit about this earlier before we came on, and that is, what do you think is needed across the Cayman Islands in order to encourage more creative writing as far as institutions or resources are concerned?
Oh, that's a good question, and I remember that. I don't know what the local schools are what the curricula at the local schools are how they're involving creative writing in their curricula. I do know that there's been a lot of cutting and gleaning away of humanities from the university, college, and other institutions. If I had all the money in the world, I would reinstate the humanities at all of them. Our public libraries are really excellent, and I would love to see more engagement at the public libraries. I'm a proud user of the public library system. Great facilities, great staff, great collection. I don't see nearly enough people using them. I would love to see a writing center administrated by several different institutions, and there are several institutions that could be managing. There's the law school, there's UCCI, ICCI, the library service. Funding for literary and book events, cooperation and partnership with the big 5 authors, publishing houses, and the Society of Authors here in the UK. That'd make me happy.
Okay, great. I will put everybody back in the screening room here. And you let me know when you're ready, and I'll share your slides for part 2.
Let's go. Let's do it, Lise.
Okay.
So we did thank Antonio, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret before we start here. He himself is a published writer now, and we would love for you to support him. He's just written a line in the sand. He won't say this himself, but it's online now, and we would appreciate you supporting him and also leaving him a review on Goodreads. Thanks once again to Antonio for being our book club lead, but also coming here today and sharing with the audience at Rewilding. And thank you to Nature Culture also, and to Lise and the team for having us here. It's our first time actually speaking outside of the comfort of our network. And so it is a very special opportunity for us, and we hope to do more of this in future with the book club. So let's talk a little bit about this book club. So book club is an extension of Cayman Connection. So its mission includes promoting knowledge, skill building, and connectivity, right? And some of the obvious things we do in book club, we read literature. So that is anything from fiction and nonfiction books, poetry, plays, and our aim is to read more literature connected to the Cayman Islands, the Caribbean, and the diasporic experience. Now, we would all agree that experiencing the writing of authors from our home country and the region is absolutely critical. And seeing ourselves reflected in the diasporic literature is incredibly rewarding. Growing up I don't think I read anything locally or that was written by a local person, much less saw anything on television that was produced locally or heard anything on the radio that had our sound. And it is refreshing to see that that is changing. So book club also intends to share recommendations for good reads, so outside of what we would normally read, and to exchange physical books. Sometimes, you know, with us being spread all over the globe as Caymanians and friends of Cayman, we want to access a book that we can't just order online and get sent to our house. So that's part of what we aim to do, is be able to share those very special books with other members, to produce events featuring writers and students and researchers, scholars, and other creatives in theater and film. As a matter of fact, we have a wonderful event coming up that we hope everyone will join us at. It's Sarah Collins in our virtual yard. She is the author of The Confessions of Franny Langton, and we are thrilled to have her with us on the 28th of November. All you have to do is visit caymanconnection.org for more information. So more of these types of events where we connect our people with people who are writing and all types of writing. And then attend events like Rewilding and others in person, also where possible. And part of the reason we're here today is that we want to interact with people who are in book clubs and exchange ideas and insights and learn how we can grow our book club so that it lasts for the long term. Now, as far as how we're structured, we meet every 6 weeks in a virtual yard. We communicate via a chat and on email. We also have a presence on Cayman Connection social media platforms. So you can follow us at caymanconnection.org on Facebook and LinkedIn, and at KConnect on Twitter and Instagram. So we post links to just about everything, our meetings, book recommendations, blogs written by Antonio and other members. And we also have a dedicated book club page on our website that we update regularly. So membership now is open to friends of the Cayman Islands. So anyone here today, anyone seeing this video that has an interest in literature from the Caribbean region, diasporic literature, including writers, we do have a couple of authors in our group. We'd love to have you with us. And all you have to do is visit our website to get more information about how to sign up as a Cayman Connection member first, and then join book club. So I want to just leave you all with a quote before I turn it over to Ashley. And this quote comes from our book club member, Gabriella Roberts. And I think it sums up quite nicely why book club is so important and so near and dear to our hearts. Quote, "Book club holds a special significance for me as a Caymanian who doesn't typically enjoy reading because it introduces me to literature that is deeply rooted in my own cultural context. By exploring fiction, nonfiction, poetry, and plays connected to the Cayman Islands, the Caribbean, and the diasporic experience, I discover stories and voices that resonate with my own lived experiences. The book club environment encourages engaging discussions and perspectives that help me appreciate the power of storytelling, bridging the gap between my initial disinterest in reading and the captivating narratives that unfold within these pages." So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to turn it over to Ashley now, and we do hope you join us at book club.
Thank you, Rita. And once again, thank you to Antonio. I think we just kind of going back a step with Cayman Connection and really the mission and purpose behind the inception of our platform. As you can hear, there's so much love for, excuse me, our country. There's so much opportunity for coming together for community. And Cayman Connection is a platform that we can access globally. It's inclusive. So one of the things you've heard us say, obviously Rita just mentioned that anybody who's watching, anybody who's joining today can sign up as a member. Even if you're just intrigued and you want to know something a little bit more about Cayman, particularly given Antonio's great presentation and, you know, kind of being able to have a little bit of a deep dive into what we are about, and you want to find out more and connect with other like-minded people. So book club is one of our special interest groups. We do have others as well, but we see that there is so much value in having these little spaces within such a big space. So just to provide context, we have over 2,000 members, and our platform has been going for over 10 years as well. As with the nature of obviously the fact that our members cover the globe, the majority of what we do tends to be virtual, but we do have face-to-face offering as well. So the fact that we have that volume of people who are engaged in our community means that we know that there's so many subsections of people within that. You know, we have students, we have parents of students who are overseas, we have professionals, just people, family members that have moved overseas for whatever reason that might be. So it's really critical that we provide opportunities where others aren't just in a space where they can talk and interact and communicate, but on something really specific that's going to add value and bring something positive to their lives that they're going to look forward to in their week as well. And literature, books is something that, you know, we all know we can connect to no matter what kind of background we're coming from, age, etc. And it hosts a really rich discussion. So we understand the benefit of it, but as we always know with everything, we can always be better. And one of the things that we wanted to do today was to be able to, whilst we have the collective people in the room today, to really understand whether there's anybody else in the room who's had an experience of being involved in a virtual, not necessarily a diasporic type book club such as ours, but a virtual book club, even a face-to-face book club. And we want to understand what were the really good things, what were the things that really took you away, that were memorable, the thing that maybe got you to come back continuously, but also what were the things you thought this could be even better, or maybe if this was put in place, there could be even more impact that could be created off the back of it. So we want to use this time really to be interactive and to share thoughts and ideas. Even if you've never been part of a virtual book club, this might all seem very new to you, what we've talked about today, or again, maybe you're curious and looking to, one, to ask questions, but also to use your creativity in the room today, to be able to come forth and sort of suggest things that you think would be of benefit to any, not just ours, but to any kind of virtual or face-to-face book club, or maybe you're even thinking of starting your own. Hopefully today's been something that's ignited a fire within you that maybe has got you to think that this could be something you might want to do within your own community as well. So I'm going to pause there, and we've got a couple of specific themes that we're going to look to talk about for this. And I want us to really think about the good, so things that we've experienced that are positive that we want to talk about from an impact point of view, but then also the even better if, so the EBIs, what things do we think could have been even better? Our two key themes are structure and impact. So Rita's going to start off with touching on the structure piece, and we just really want to open the floor up. We really want to get this time to share ideas, to get the juices flowing, and to think no matter whether you've had a lot of involvement or not at this point. So I'm going to hand over to Rita on structure.
Thanks so much, Ashley. So I think all of our mics can be off at this point. We're happy to have people interact. It's a small group. And the game is help us make our Diaspora Book Club the best it can be. As far as structure, what things would work well for a global book club like ours that is virtual? What might not work so well? And perhaps what could we explore together? And you can unmute and you can just speak freely here.
Yes, if I've done the tech correctly, you should be able to turn your cameras on and unmute so we can have a conversation.
And Ashley's also placed these in the chat. To give you all an idea, we have members in Canada. When I say members, I mean Cayman Connection members. The United States, Cayman Islands, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, England, parts of Northern Europe, Asia, and I think it's quite obvious what some of the challenges could be, but what we're looking to do is make our book club successful. and how could we do that? And we would love to hear from you about what could work well structurally to make it happen. Who reads books here? Who loves books? Who's in a book club? Who's not in a book club? Okay, we have a raised hand. ANA
I'm
Festival.
afraid that was me.
Well,
and
we know-
Kate has raised her hand, and I'd much rather she speak. So go for it, Kate.
have both of you speak. We'll start with Kate. All right, Kate. Tell us
Okay.
what comes to mind.
Starting with me. Hello, everybody. Just thank you so much for this really insightful and interesting and fascinating session. And thank you for putting it on as well. So it's brilliant. My disclaimer here is that I am in Cayman Connection Book Club myself. I love it. I've been watching it grow and participating. In terms of what works in other book clubs, I obviously would like to hear as well. I mean, I think the main thing is about communication. And like Rita said, obviously the time differences are a challenge. There are obvious challenges, but more than that, how we communicate with each other to update each other on what we're reading and even when meetings are, because we all have different modes of communication that we favor. Some people will prefer emails, some people like WhatsApp, some people hate WhatsApp, some people like social media, some people aren't on social media. So I think one of the greatest challenges, and I think with having a book club that meets either in person or virtually, that's great. Once you're there all in a room together, then that's when all the good stuff happens. But leading up to that, from a structural point of view, how to making sure that people are engaged in between times and knowing when the book clubs are and things like that. I think that's something I'm really interested to hear different people talk about. I think in our case, we use all of the platforms, which is obviously time consuming, but seems to be the only way we can kind of reach everybody. But I'd be really interesting. And I am in another book club, only just, but it's an on-island book club. But not obviously, for those that don't know, I'm based in the UK, so rarely in Cayman. So I can't make it to the in-person meetings, but I am on their emails. And I noticed that there's one main book club lead that sends the emails to remind everybody when it is and what they're reading, and that's kind of pretty much it as far as I know. But I will, while I'm on island, try and speak to those. I don't believe they're on this call now, to ask those same questions and see if I can feed back that to you as well. But anyway, that would be my thing about communication, how we best engage with each other between meetings.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kate. And thank you for being here as well. I see Nancy has her virtual hand raised. Nancy, would love to hear from you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good, great. I've been in several book clubs that have been across distances, and one thing I really value is subgrouping at the virtual meeting itself. So you talk and you have it, and it's a directed thing. So we break down into subgroups that are probably small, maybe anywhere from 3 to 8 people, much smaller than the big group, with a directed question. We get to know each other a little bit. It doesn't matter if we're physically close or not. It's fun to learn about people from the other part of the state, etc. So the subgrouping, and then the coming back to the large group again. I really appreciate that. Going big, small, kind of in a directed way.
Thank you, Nancy. That makes sense. I mean, absolutely. And we do that with other programs that we have, but we had not employed that for CC Book Club. However, it does make total sense. And maybe, would you say having someone in a particular region leading that small group, is that the idea? If you're in Canada, the Canada members, they would have a lead that handles sort of the smaller communications?
Well, I think it could be a both and. It could be that, which is a little bit of homogeneous grouping. It could be totally heterogeneous grouping, which is, oh my God, I've talked to somebody from England or something like that. So I think it could go any way, as long as it's directed and you have a task to focus on, and you can meet people and focus on a task. So.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that. Super useful. So would anyone else like to comment on this? If not, we'll move on to impact. So we just got an idea that we have not, at least I hadn't considered before. I don't think we had as a club. And we do have, as Ashley mentioned earlier, other global clubs. We have a cook club, mentioning here in case anyone wants to join. We have a cook club, we have a fit club, and we have a bush club. And bush club might be particularly interesting to people on this call because it is very much tied to nature. And we explore traditional remedies, what we call bush medicine in Cayman. But we also do nature tours and talks in our virtual space. So we'll put it in the chat where you can go to learn more about all of our global clubs. Thank you, Nancy. I'm going to now invite Ashley to speak on impact, and we'd love to hear from you on this as well.
Mm. Thanks, Rita, and thank you, Nancy, for your feedback as well. That's really helpful, and I think there's something about virtual that can be tricky with trying to connect really intimately. So I think the smaller groups and pairings where you can allow people to have that also cultural exchange, because if they are in a different country and you can kind of be quite selective about it, I really like the idea of that. So thank you. When we talk about impact, we're looking at, okay, so this is wonderful. People are coming together to review, to read, all of the things that Rita listed that we typically do within our book club, share recommendations, exchange books, and produce events for writers and authors, etc. But what is it we're actually achieving as a result of that? What is the impact we're making on the lives of the members, the participants, the guest speakers that are coming on board, and just also the literature ecosystem itself more broadly, because we really want to be quite purposeful on that and very clear on what the impact is that we're driving through what to some might seem like quite a small network in the grand scheme of the literature world, but actually is very powerful. So the next kind of theme, if you like, that we wanted to kind of have discussion on is, what impact do you feel, again, through experience from being a personal participant of a book club? What were the things that you felt you actually came away with? So that could be something quite specific, such as, well, actually, it really allowed me to encourage my reading. It gave me momentum, it gave me accountability, but it might have given you something as a residual benefit that actually it's really supported my mental health, or it's given me a kind of place just for me, for that community cohesion that you can't quite get elsewhere. So, and again, if you haven't been involved in a book club, that's totally fine. It might be that actually thinking about it now, if you were to be in one or start one, I'm determined to inspire somebody today to start a virtual book club. What is the impact you would want to make, and what would you want to see, and being purposeful about that. So just want to ask on that and open the floor up. Lise, I think that's your hand, I believe.
It is. Thanks for doing this. And as a member of the book club, I really do appreciate the opportunity to see the diaspora literature through the eyes of people who live there. It's because it's very different from the outside. And I think mostly this festival is in part about helping people who have different viewpoints about place come together and discuss what it means to them and the importance of it. And what I like about Cayman Connection is, well, of course, because it's in Cayman, but also because you bring place, you bring the island home to people who are not there. So with the book club and the cook club and the bush club, all those things, you explore different aspects of the culture and nature that go together in Cayman, and share that. So I just really appreciate that about book club.
Thank you, Lise. And yeah, as you say, there's something quite special about being able to bring that piece of home to all of those different interest groups in their own unique and special way. I am going to do an awkward silence or pause just to see if there's anyone else who maybe has any more thoughts on impact around virtual or face-to-face book clubs. Any benefits people feel that they've received or would like to see. Maybe something a bit innovative that could be added as an additional element to a book club.
No, just thinking of our younger members and or younger contacts, and encouraging them to join and to read and to feel like they can, and not to feel in any way that those are those, some of us are more experienced in reading or writing, but also encourage them by some kind of I'm thinking of, like, I don't know, like a book club star system or something that they can show, you know, that we've read this many books, or I'm a part of this club, something that might even be an accolade for them in some way on a resume or a CV, or just something they can mention, you know, in getting jobs as an extra thing, but actually has some kind of stamp on it in a way. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'm just wondering, just thought of that.
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense. And I think something that I've come across in the UK in local authority world is skills passports. There's something that the council's trying to introduce for those who aren't typically going through a generic pathway of education, as it were, into career and employability. So what they're doing is, if they're going to specific hubs, like visiting the library is actually one of them. They scan their skills passport, so it's recorded and tracked. So then when they're going to an employer, they have a log of all of these things that they've done, which are maybe deemed, some things as softer skills, or they might be deemed as more extracurricular involvement and commitments, but they're really critical to their development. So maybe employing something like that kind of style that helps them with their resume, as you mentioned, is a really great suggestion. So definitely food for thought. Thank you. Antonio, ever so polite with the
I just wanted to just comment overall on book clubs' impact and engagement, the sense of connection, the comfort that we've established within the members. Is a very sort of broad representation and welcoming group, and it's such a compliment to the reading experience to have someone a group of people to discuss it with every 6 weeks. We are also, compared to other book discussion groups that I've been a member of, we're very lively, very organic, but at the same time, we're really what I would call Socratic. And I mean, if talking was a soft skill, I would be a professor of it, but I never wanted it to be a sort of a back and forth, somebody at the top of the hierarchy with hot air. It goes all the way around and circles around over that hour, and we'll slightly deviate from time, a little bit off topic, and then the person next to me will bring it back to the center. And very rarely can we keep the book discussion to 60 minutes. And at the end of those sessions, I always have notes, and looking back at them, they are such a compliment to whatever it is I'm reading or whatever I'm planning on reading next. I think that any student, undergraduate, graduate, postgraduate, would really find value in joining a club just like ours.
Thank you, Antonio. And I think that's part of the excitement about coming together as well. I think the characters that we have to help with the energy, it's definitely about what makes you want to go, so it's not a chore, it's not something that you see as, an obligation, or it's something you're excited to do. And it really is a great platform. Go ahead, Rita.
It is. I second that. And I feel like we're in these times, and particularly if we want to interest young people from our country, but from other places in the world too, because we've seen such development in the area of screenwriting in the Cayman Islands, we may look at, and it is something we've put down in our aims, but we may look at screenplays as part of our readings with the authors of those screenplays. Because and many of them, for instance, Sarah Collins, you know, she wrote the book, she wrote the novel, and then adapted it for television. So we might go that route and attract more people, perhaps, by doing that, by twisting things a little bit, shifting it a little bit, and maybe for a season, maybe seasonally, or you know, it wouldn't necessarily be year round, but lots of opportunities.
Definitely in abundance, which is great. Unless there's anything specific from anybody else in terms of that impact or structure piece or anything book club related, I guess we'll come to a close there. But I just want to say that we are, obviously you've seen our faces now. You hopefully feel part of the Cayman Connection family. If there is any thoughts, suggestions, bright spark ideas, or you just want to come and connect with us, the door is always open. We obviously shared the QR code. Our website is caymanconnection.org, so you can sign up as a member there for free. And there's a book club specific page, so you can find out the information, and you can see Antonio's wonderful recommendation list and some of the reads that we've explored through book club as well. But we just want to thank you for taking the time, excuse me, to listen and to hear what we have to say from the Cayman Islands and our sharing around our heritage and where we've come to reach with our book club platform. And once again, a big thank you to Lise, and we'll also put make sure that the website link is in the chat, but do reach out if you have any questions, and we'll be more than happy to welcome you into our book club. So thank you.